Welcome everyone, it's Haz here, and today I'll share some of my recommendations for Dragon Quest Infinity Strash that either made me enjoy the game a lot more or help me progress better and tackle some of the harder content in the game, and trust me, there's quite a lot of those. So here are my 5 essential tips for DQ Die. If you're interested in more Infinity Strash content or other Dragon Quest, like and subscribe as I will also cover other titles like DQ Monsters later this year. So my first tip for the game will be extremely subjective, but since this is also one of the most criticized parts of the game, I feel it needs to be said. The majority of the storytelling in Infinity Strash is done through still images and vignettes that tell the adventure of Dai's story on a surface level with the most important scenes. I personally think this kind of storytelling isn't really useful for nor veterans nor newcomers, as it feels a bit rushed and important scenes are just skipped, and even though I enjoyed them, they are really out of place and interrupt the general game flow for a lot. So my first tip would be that if you're not a huge fan of the vignettes or you have an option to experience the story of Dai through the anime, then I would recommend skipping them, and you'll see that the game flow will get a lot better and enjoyable, especially if you get past the beginning hours. That is a bit of a poorly done tutorial that drags on a bit too much. I'd like to apologize to the voice actors and the developers for suggesting this as a tip. They've done a fantastic job, it's just I think the pacing isn't enjoyable here for many. Also, if you change your mind later, you can actually rewatch every single cutscene and episode from your scrapbook, so in essence you can also just create your own pace to enjoy the story. My next tip is about possibly the most crucial mechanics of Infinity Strash, and that's perfect dodges and perfect blocks. I would recommend to immediately start heavily practicing both mechanics from the get-go, which means timing your dodges and blocks for the moment of an attack to perform their perfect versions, as later on some fights will actually get really tough and require you to perform these actions, especially in challenge mode. But players who completely ignore them might feel frustrated from fights and even call them cheap, despite the fact that they just require you to use core mechanics. Perfect dodges are the easier form of defense and is enough for the whole game, as all you have to do is simply dodge into attacks instead of away from them, and your invulnerability window will do the rest. Feel free to try it out and you'll see how easy perfect dodges are, and on top of it all they also slightly increase your ultimate coup de grace gauge, so they are also pretty useful to perform. Now sometimes you will also have to guard, and the harder form of defense is perfect blocking, and while it isn't necessary around 80% of the time, it has its uses, namely the fact that they stagger enemies and thus interrupt fast multi-hit combos that they try to perform. So in case you have trouble dodging multi-hit super attacks from bosses or you feel overwhelmed and would like to create more openings for attacks, that is when perfect blocking is really useful. Unfortunately, perfect blocks are considerably harder than dodges, as you will have to time your blocks for the exact moment the attack would hit you, so it requires a lot of practice. Moving on, remember that items do drop on your missions. If you haven't been focusing on breakable objects on your quests, make sure to always look for them, as they drop very valuable items from bonus gold, coup de grace charge, or even maximum healing. The great part is also that these items are 100% always the same, and for instance, if you break barrels, they will always hold a maximum healing essence when you need one, and these barrels also appear on tough boss fights, so always make sure to look for them. They will be really handy to not get frustrated. You will also see pots laying around that you should also break if you can, as these are the items that drop coup de grace charges to boost your ultimate meter up. Once again, really useful especially on boss fights when you need burst damage to quickly get rid of your enemies. Remember that you only have limited amount of items on your missions, so these breakable objects become very valuable and should be part of your strategy on your quests, especially later on in challenge mode. Once you reach Chapter 2, I believe you will unlock the game's so-called side content, the Temple of Recollection, that I would say is much more than side content and is potentially the main part of Infinity Strash instead. The Temple of Recollection is a roguelite dungeon that you can progress floor to floor, battling monsters and choosing special upgrades for yourself between each level to get stronger, and through your journey in the temple, you will encounter various monsters, bosses, and even treasure rooms to get permanent upgrades to your characters, like upgrade resources for skills, or valuable memory bonds that range from 1 star to special 3-star ultimates with extra effects. You can use all of these upgrades in the main story also to help you in case you are stuck. Be careful though, as if you die in the dungeon you lose all your treasures, and as a traditional rogue experience, you will start from the get-go at level 1. Now the temple was said to be a side content of Infinity Strash, but frankly you can spend dozens more hours in this content compared to the main campaign, and on top of it, It might even be a lot more fun due to the randomized fights and overall better game flow through upgrades, boss rushes, and constant progression you experience. The temple also unlocks new content as you complete the main story, and after you beat the campaign, it even unlocks further bonus levels and even super bosses, which is why I truly think the campaign is just a tutorial for you to enjoy the story, and then get into the temple and enjoy the main bulk of what Infinity Strash has to offer. You can also easily create multiple builds, party setups, and combinations here that alone will take dozens of hours of grinding and farming to be able to build, and on top of it, the temple is really not easy and it will take many attempts and tries to even get close to the end of it, not to mention beat its super bosses. If you fancy that kind of content, you can also challenge yourself in here to do solo or duo runs with your favorite characters and see if you can beat its challenges, since really it won't be easy. Finally, if you ever feel like you're underleveled in the campaign, just hop into side quests marked with the red icons and you'll have a chance to encounter our old friends, the metal slimes from DQ, that just like always will grant you a lot of extra experience to level up fast so you can continue your journey. Be careful, as just like in the rest of the series, you deal no damage to metal slimes and you need to get lucky to hit them. But in the Temple of Recollection, you can actually grind a memory bond called the Boy Living on Monster Island that gives you guaranteed 1 damage on all metal slimes, allowing you to easily defeat all of them. I will also release a video the next day about the best area I found for leveling up and farming experience, where I constantly encounter 3 to even 4 metal slimes and will help you get 20 plus levels in just a few minutes. But those were my 5 tips to get into Infinity Strash and potentially have a much better time with the game. I really think it is a fun Dragon Quest if you look past the poor beginning of it, and I just feel it's another title people just like to hate on due to the massive amounts of really successful games that were released recently. Though I do have to say $60 for the game is really expensive. Personally, I think the game is an average hack and slash that's a treat for Dragon Quest fans, considering how rare we get these games for the series in the West, and if you like the adventure of Dice Story, you'll probably love this game too if you give it an honest chance. Thank you for watching, everyone. That is it for this quick tips video. As I said at the start, like and subscribe for more Dragon Quest content, as I'll be covering them a lot more moving on next to a variety of other games, so stay tuned. Take care, and I'll see you the next time.